Welcome to the Dota Radio Morning Show, presented by Dota Radio, the internet radio dedicated to Dota 2. Make sure you visit us at dotaradio.com to learn more about our audio-only style of commentary. Remember, folks, you can tweet at us live during the show at Zyori TV with questions, comments, or all of the above, and we may field them live during the show as your tweets pertain to our topics. We've got a great show coming up for you guys this morning. We're going to be talking patch 6.79 that launched on Monday and some of the matches and strategies we've seen as a result. Owie 2000 from Speed Gaming, aka Hippie, aka Rattlesnake Gaming, our international, going to be joining us later on in the show to talk about his take on 0.79 and what Speed Gaming have been up to as of late. We're going to be taking a closer look at the patch notes and explore the possibilities as well in our segment, Where's My Meta, coming from Hippie later on in the show. So to start things off, folks, for our very first episode, going to give you guys a little bit of backstory. Going to do kind of an impromptu vlog here about what's happening at Dota Radio. As some of you may know, we've run up to that issue now that we've gotten popular enough. We can't cover any tournament we want without working with the organizers ahead of time. So that's why we've been off air a little bit more than planned. We ran into that whole big issue with D2CL and Daily Motion and all that other stuff, which we'll talk about in more detail tomorrow, as we will have a guest actually from Hitbox TV talking about streaming platforms and all that good stuff. At present, the Dota Radio Morning Show is planned to be a 5-day-a-week show, every weekday around 10 o'clock a.m. Eastern Standard Time. Obviously, we got started a little bit later today, but that is our designated start time. We're going to start today on Wednesday, October 23rd. It's kind of a short week for 3 days, see how it feels, and decide if we actually want to commit to that 5-day format or take it down to something a little bit better, or easier to manage, I should say, maybe a 3 or 4 day schedule. So we'll see how it goes, but thank you for joining us. We are a multifaceted cast here. We are live on Twitch TV for a basic video feed. We are live on our audio-only radio station, which is found at mixlr.com/theDotaRadio, and you can find both of those on the index of dotaradio.com. And we encourage you guys to communicate with us. Make sure you drop us a line. You can email us here, morningshow@dotaradio.com, and we will use questions or comments there for future Q&A if you have any feedback about the show. And make sure you visit us on the web. This will be the portal where you can find the audio archived versions of the episodes. A lot of folks have been asking about, will this be a podcast? Yes, it will. As soon as we're done on air, we're going to strip the audio, upload it as its own little MP3, and that should work on all of your podcasting software, across platform, across everything. They will be just MP3 files. I know that's one thing that a lot of folks have been sending me messages about as of late, and we got you covered. We got you covered. So we are going to start off today with some introductions from our host. Myself, Zyori, I'll be hosting the show. We've got Hippie joining us on the analysis desk. Hippie, how are you today, sir?
Doing good, man. Happy to be here. Excited to get this started.
It's always a pleasure, my friend. Always a pleasure. And we have a new face around the Dota radio scene here, a new voice for those of you on the audio-only stream. We've got Monoloth, the Dignitas team manager and sort of our master of communications, as it may be. He's in charge of getting all those interviews set up and contributing his unique perspective as a team manager. Monolith, how are you feeling today, my friend?
Good to be here.
Oh, believe me, sir, the pleasure is all ours. We were so glad that you reached out via that Reddit post. So far, it's been a good match, and I'm excited to have you here. And I'm excited to have Owie on later. I know you and him have sort of a history. You did the Mad, Much Ado About Dota, where I know he was a part of that. So we are going to do some introductions here, and perhaps, Hippie, you want to go first? Just give us a little rundown of what you've done in esports, who you are, and for the first-time viewers, why you're important.
Well, I'm Hippie. I've been doing esports stuff since the Han scene. I did some very early work with Hancast before Zyori came and kind of did a they took our jibes thing on me. And then I moved on to Firefall. I casted that with NESL for a while, but my true love always really stayed with the MOBA scene. And when I made the switch to Dota 2, I was looking for an opportunity to do some casting of my own. I did some solo casting. I didn't get a lot of eyes, and when I saw the Dota Radio project, I was like, this sounds awesome. I want to get in on this. So I sent Zyori a completely unsolicited PM via Reddit and said, hey, can I cast with you? And he was like, I have no idea who you are, but sure! And it's ended up being a really good match, and I've been doing Dota Radio stuff for about a month now, I think.
Yep.
It's been.
It's a little bit longer. It's been 6 weeks-ish, but... Oh, yeah, I guess you came in a few weeks in.
Yeah,
so.
I came in a little late.
Yeah.
But so, I think it's been a really good match. I've had an absolute blast, and I'm loving it, man.
Yeah, that was one of those. Every so often, I like to gamble with a real-life decision. I was like, you know what, let's just try this guy out. Unsolicited, never heard his voice before. let's do this thing. And that first cast we did was surprisingly good, given we had absolutely no rapport, had never even spoken to each other before. That was an interesting little gamble that paid off. Regardless, man, I'm glad you were able to make time for this show, and glad you're here. Monolith, as I mentioned, you are the manager of Team Dignitas, and that's great because Dignitas just won MLG Full Sail, which we're going to talk about in our next little segment here. But what have you been up to? You've been around Dota for quite some while, huh?
Yeah, I guess I've been playing the game for about 8 or 9 years. I've been involved in esports in the scene for about a little more than 2 years. Um, last summer, Aoya asked me to manage a team called Pot and Bottom, and said yeah. And ever since then, I've been the manager of Team Dignitas.
So that's pretty exciting. Talk to us a little bit about what it's like to be a team manager in the current landscape. Is it glamorous? I know there's a lot of people out there that think I really want to work in esports and managing a team is something I could do. I'm not a pro player, but I'm organized. I have a degree in business or what have you. Would you recommend it to people? Is it all glamour or is it more work than fun in many a case?
Oh, it's definitely more work than fun. I don't know that there's so much glamour. We pretty much I guess the big perk is just being involved in doing something you love and traveling to all the events and seeing and working with some amazing people. Other than that, not so much glamour. Long flights, busy days,
Yeah.
lots of problems.
Yeah, well, traveling is a double-edged sword on that front for sure. It's fun and exciting, but it is tiresome and stressful, especially as a team manager. I dabbled in team management a little bit with Itsugosu, their StarCraft team at an MLG, and just I was in charge of managing 2 Korean players for a couple days, and just between the language barrier and not understanding the culture and just confused about the format, everything, it's way more stressful than it seems. It seems pretty easy at face value, but it's amazing how quickly things can go awry once you get to the event and everyone's doing their own thing and everyone's walking in different directions. Just keeping everybody as a congealed unit to make sure they're at the right place at the right time is surprisingly difficult. So let's go ahead and move straight into it here. We do have some news to talk about, and before that, I want to mention 2 things that are important. One, PAX East ticket sales are going on sale today in about an hour and 20 minutes. As you can see, it is 10:40 here on the East Coast, and PAX East, if you don't know what that is, I don't know where you've been, but the tickets are a big deal. It always sells out, at least the past few years, and it's sort of like getting Justin Bieber tickets. Everyone gets in line and they just spam that refresh button for hotel rooms and tickets and try to make sure they can lock it in at the normal rate before everything goes up and you have to resort to black market ticket purchases as it may be. So if you're interested and you haven't heard that yet, I got a text message alert yesterday. In about an hour and 20 minutes or so, PAX East tickets will go on sale, so make sure you hop on that because they will indeed go out. And if you've never been to a PAX, I recommend it. Have either of you guys been able to attend a PAX event?
Yeah, I was at PAX East and PAX Prime last year.
Oh, okay.
It's cool. Lots of people. Not a huge Dota presence though, but still fun to see.
Yeah, that's true. How about you, Hippie? Have you made it out to a PAX yet?
I personally have not. I have a group of friends who go every year, but when time comes to get tickets and buy hotel rooms and stuff, I was like, "We're going to PAX," and I was like, "I don't have the money for that."
It's expensive. Boston is pricey.
It is expensive.
Yeah, PAX is interesting. As you mentioned, Monolith, it's not particularly Dota heavy, but it's more of a kind of a dealer's convention. A lot of companies use that to launch new titles, and that was where PAX East this past year in 2013 is where Blizzard announced Heroes of Warcraft. That was the Hearthstone thing. That was their big announcement. So it is pretty exciting. I actually didn't have fun at this last PAX East. It was way too crowded. I felt like I was at Warped Tour. Like I just never had a chance to breathe. I was constantly surrounded by thousands of people. It was like there were too many people in one big space. I don't know. I've heard the PAX Prime layout is a lot better than the PAX East layout in terms of having segregated convention halls and such instead of just having one big room like they do at PAX East where everyone is trying to get through. I mean, just moving from booth to booth is like, yeah, it's terrible. Shoulder to shoulder. No good. So, all right, let's get straight into our news here. Dignitas, they did take Full Sail over Team Mistakes this past weekend, and I think we have the brackets here that we can take a look at. Indeed, we do. Monoloth, of course, you are the manager of Team Dignitas, as we mentioned a couple times now. How was it? You were there at the event. Your team won, so I guess congratulations are in order. But overall, what was your take on MLG Full Sail?
To be honest, I mean, it was well run. Everything went smoothly. I guess from my perspective, it was so short and went by so quickly that it wasn't like a real. It's hard to get a grasp of how it really was because it was only we were only there for a day, and that day went well though.
Yeah.
But it was a lot of fun. The MLG guys were really great. The production was really cool. And they put up a really good show despite it being, I guess, a smaller LAN tournament.
Yeah, and so I think the tournament itself was 2 days, but Dota was only on the first day. Is that right? The second day was like Call of Duty and all that other stuff?
Yeah.
Yeah. So it was very short. I thought that Dota was going to be spread over 2 days. So they actually had a lot of matches across those 2 days. Hippie and I casted one series, I think, before Adam told us to take our stream down. So that was sort of bittersweet. It was bitter at the time, but sweet afterwards now that we have a dialogue with Adam. And I know he's at least seen my MLG Caster application because he replied to it by saying, please stop restreaming our stream on Twitch TV. So for better or for worse, but what are you going to do? I did get to catch some of it. I actually didn't catch the grand finals where Dignitas did win 2-1 over Typical Mistakes, which is interesting because that was the first series of the day, was actually Dignitas versus TM, which Hippie and I did cover. And Dignitas won the original semifinal series, but the finals, I hear, were way more close than they needed to be. Is that an appropriate descriptor, Monolith?
Man, I felt like the first game we played with him in the semifinals, or the first game of the day was also way closer than it needed to be.
Yeah.
But yeah, in the beginning we didn't play as well as we needed to, and Typical Mistakes, man, they improved a lot over the last month. I talked to Jube and some of the other guys, and they have been scrimming.
Mm-hmm.
They have been practicing a lot for the LAN, so it's not like they just went into the tournament willy nilly.
Right.
And expected to lose or anything. They really improved. And with the advantages that they had in some of the games, if they were a more experienced team, we probably would have lost.
Yeah.
So it's to them.
Yeah, absolutely. So with that, though, your team did take home $10,000 as a first place prize. The Typical Mistakes did walk home with $5,000. I'm glancing at my other monitor here to make sure that I'm on point with those numbers. And I believe that was correct. Yeah, the $15,000 prize pool. So that's pretty exciting. That's a nice chunk of change, and that also means Dignitas will secure a seat in the upcoming MLG Columbus tournament, which is coming up November 22nd through 24th, if I'm not mistaken. And with that, we've got a huge tournament now. We've got a massive 8-team lineup. We've got Alliance, Na'Vi, DK, Team Liquid, Evil Geniuses, Fnatic, Speed Gaming / Kaipi / Rattlesnake, and the winner of Full Sail, which is now Team Dignitas. I don't think you could put together a better tournament in terms of the most exciting teams in the world right now than those rosters. Maybe if Tong Fu was in there instead of one of those other European teams, just to get another flavor of the Asian scene. But having DK mixed in with all that is pretty exciting. It's pretty awesome. I can't wait for MLG Columbus coming up.
Absolutely. I mean, that's just something, especially getting DK in there is probably the biggest thing for me. Getting them to a LAN tournament in the United States that isn't the international, getting any Asian team to a LAN tournament outside of China is a huge, huge win. And the fact that MLG has really, really pushed to get DK, who are now pretty much the Chinese dream team. I mean, they've been putting up absolutely insane results in every single Chinese tournament right now. I don't think anyone at the moment contests that they're probably the #1 team in China. It's definitely a hard-fought spot. Don't get me wrong. There's a lot of really good team lineups since that reshuffle.
Yeah.
But DK is just absolutely incredible. Mm-hmm. And the fact that MLG is putting in the effort to get them onto American soil outside of the international, to bring them here, basically so all of us can really enjoy this event. Obviously, they are a for-profit group. They want to make some money off of it, but they didn't need to bring DK to have a very, very profitable tournament. Right. They really want to make sure their first big Dota 2 offering goes really well. And you can tell they've been putting in a lot of work.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right about that. And we saw the premiere of their new streaming platform with this tournament, and it's not Twitch. It's totally different. It's embedded in the MLG website. You can't see the live viewers, and the quality was really stunning. I mean, surprisingly good. You don't realize the Twitch TV quality in a lot of cases isn't even really close to what true 720p or what true 1080p looks like. In the MLG stream, they really stepped up their game. I was impressed with their new streaming platform. And as folks in chat are mentioning here, there is a 9th team attending MLG Columbus. This is the 8-team kind of all-star roster went over, and I think the last one is for an online qualifier that is underway right now. It might actually begin tonight, actually, now that they're back in the studio and everything. So we'll see who that is. And I don't know, do either of you know the specifics about that tournament and who can qualify? Is it going to be another North American team, or is it just anybody that wants to play?
It's gonna be you have to have at least, I believe, at least 3 North Americans.
Okay, so it's another North American. So it very well could be typical mistakes based on how well they played in Full Sail, huh?
Yeah, that's what they plan on.
Yeah.
Talked to those guys there, and they said, see you in Columbus.
See you in Columbus. Yeah, it should be awesome. I'm really looking forward to it. I've been to 8 different MLG events. This will be the first one that I'll be attending that doesn't have StarCraft. Well, actually, that's I'm trying to think. Was StarCraft at MLG DC 2010? Yes, it was. It was still in beta, but it was there. This will be the first time I'll go to an MLG that hasn't had StarCraft 2 since 2010. That's crazy. That's going to be a bittersweet feeling as well. All my friends aren't going to be there because they're all StarCraft people. So now I get to make new friends with all the Dota folks. So that'll be fun. It's a fun event. Columbus is a nice city. I really enjoyed the last, I guess it was MLG 2011 when I was there, and it was a good time. So MLG Columbus coming up. We'll see who that qualifying team is. We'll keep reporting on that in future episodes as that tournament continues to progress. So other tournament news I want to talk about. OGN has now announced the Nexon Invitational Super Match, which is sort of an interesting take on tournaments here. And it's a little bit different because this is not a true competitive format. It's not about who's the best team, who's going to work their way through the brackets. This tournament is all about lining up the best players, best teams in the world and saying, all right, what are the coolest matchups we can make? What do people really want to see? Let's figure out who wins, Alliance versus DK, in that kind of arena where you normally don't get to see those players. I like that. Do you guys have a take or any opinion about what is it? The Invitational Super Match. I also like the name. It's just Jesus.
I think it's a good way not only to get some really great matchups like you mentioned. I mean, Alliance versus the new DK. Maybe getting some of these new lineups going. The new Liquid lineup has been performing really, really well. I mean, the switch of Bulbin and Mid and putting Koikfan on the offlane has been very successful for them, so we get to see how they stand up to these new teams. We're going to get Tongfu for that one. People have been talking about how well Tongfu is playing. And it's going to be a nice way to gauge the progress of the Korean scene, because there's going to be, obviously, the one Korean team in every week's round robin. Mm-hmm. So, I mean, that scene is pretty fresh. Korea has very much been a League of Legends sort of country for a while now, and they put out some incredibly good League of Legends teams. Yeah. But they haven't really gotten into Dota, and now that they're starting to pick it up, they're starting to put out some pro teams, they're starting to have some tournaments, and now we get to see how their progress is going to be going. Quite frankly, Koreans have a history of being the best at a lot of games. Yeah, and 15 grand on the line. I mean, it's not a bad prize pool. We found in the past that money does tend to motivate these teams to give it their all, and that's really not a bad prize pool for a lesser match format in terms of is it just one match every week? I actually am. Each week, 2 invited teams and 1 Korean team will play each other twice in a round robin group. So that's a pretty good prize pool for the amount of matches teams have to play. That's one of those ratios you got to weigh out. Some tournaments that have pretty sizable prize pools require an absurd amount of matches that teams need to be present for. So I think these big teams will also be happy with this format because they can win some cash, get some notoriety, and it takes a little bit less of their sweet, valuable time. Perhaps Monolith can attest to the strenuous schedules of competitive Dota teams.
Yeah, it's also a free trip. Nexon is paying for everything. Wow. So, yeah, as far as the tournament goes, I think it's really good for Korean teams. I mean, it's one of these ways to get Western teams to Nexon and have them play Korean teams, but in a sort of controlled format. So you're not inviting Western teams to be in your league like year round, where I mean, quite frankly, they'll just crush all the Korean teams, and your scene doesn't grow so much.
Mm-hmm.
But this way, you get a little bit of both. You get the Korean teams exposed to the Western teams, um, without getting totally destroyed throughout the year.
Right, right. That's interesting. I hadn't realized that they were flying everyone into Korea to make that happen. So that's even more interesting. Like you said, it's a free trip. That's always got to be exciting for these competitive players. So interesting. We'll keep an eye out for OGN and see how their international super match unfolds. When does it actually start? Monday and Thursday? Is there? Oh, the 28th of October. So that's the designated start date, 5 days from now. So it's coming up pretty soon. We'll definitely keep an eye out for that. The big talking point for today, though, is patch 6.79, as I've titled it here, the patch that has changed it all. It's sort of an interesting patch, and there's a lot of stuff to digest, and that's going to take us into our first section of talking points here. Woohoo! Look at all these overlays. I had so much fun putting this this production together. So we're going to start talking about patch notes here, and there were a lot of changes. Feel free to chime in sort of whenever you want, guys. We're going to break it down by meta changes, hero changes, and item changes. There are way more notes that we're going to cover here. This is kind of that Sloan Skinny. There was a great post on Join Dota going over some of the big highlights, and that's what we're going to do here. So one of the big things first, the buyback style has been changed. There's really no other way to put it. Now when you buy back, you won't be able to gain unreliable gold until your respawn timer goes back down. So that 80 seconds or whatever it is, depending on your level, is a time where you won't be able to farm. Essentially, reliable gold is just hero kills, hero assists. So that means farming creeps, farming neutrals. That static gold gain you get every 0.7 seconds is off the field. So that should cut down on a lot of the rage buybacks, and that really just changes the state of how valuable buybacks are. I think that'll help influence teams pushing up, forcing those buybacks, and then just backing up, because even if you make that anti-mage buyback, they got to make something happen. If they buy back and then don't get subsequent kills, that's huge. I mean, you just cost them all of that farming time. So that's one of those interesting changes. XP and gold have been reworked a little bit. The static gold gain has been changed to be a little bit faster. You now have 22 more starting gold, up to 625. Random gold has been reduced by 50, and gold for ending a spree has been increased. So now you get extra gold when you finish off someone's killing spree, dominating streak, all that kind of stuff. One of the other weird things about XP now, when neutrals die, regardless of who gets the last hit, all the heroes in that radius share the experience. So now you can just sort of deny that farming from the supports that like to play in the jungle by just being nearby, and you get to share some of that experience even if you don't get the last hit. So both of those are big changes. Barracks now, regeneration. I believe it's set so that the ranged racks... how is it here? I've got it all turned around in my head. The ranged racks now don't regenerate health, and melee racks regenerate double the speed. So they now go super fast, and the ranged racks don't regenerate at all. I think that's right. Hippie, correct me if I'm wrong here.
No, you're correct. You're correct.
All right. So, yeah, that's just another one of those changes.
Also,
oh, go ahead.
The barracks HP for the ranged racks was reduced, but the armor was increased. So it's the same EHP versus physical, but it's got a...
Okay.
It's a small change,
right.
But once you get into the math of minus armor and stuff, it's slightly different.
Right, okay, I gotcha. So the Roshan respawn time now going to be random. The respawn time is a random time between 8 and 11 minutes after he dies, so that makes posting the time not irrelevant, but a little bit less relevant. That means teams are going to have to be more active about fighting around the Rosh pit, and it adds sort of an element of RNG, which can spice up games a little bit. Day and night timing now have been changed. The duration from 6 minutes now to 4 minutes, so day and night will fluctuate more frequently. And I already talked about the starting gold and income changes, so those are just the general changes to the game, and these are huge. I mean, Hippie, you're sort of our analysis mechanics guy. On the grand scheme of things, it's hard this early on. The patch came out on Monday, today's Wednesday, to gauge how this is going to impact the meta, but initial thoughts about how these changes are impacting the game, both good and bad. What do you got?
In my personal scrims, I've seen a lot more aggressive tri-lanes. Obviously, we've seen completely different heroes. Some heroes who got some big indirect buffs based on just the new mechanics. Bounty Hunter he was already really good at harassing junglers, but with the fact that now if you want to really overload your safe lane, you pretty much have to do it with a dedicated jungler. It's a lot less efficient to have a couple supports just sitting there and farming the jungle now.
Right.
And so with junglers being more powerful and also getting the shared experience from neutrals among everyone, Bounty Hunter is now a really, really critical hero. You're seeing him banned out a lot more in the second phase, just because he's not only a powerful ganker, and he always has been, and Track is an amazing skill, and with people playing more aggressive, Track is more powerful, but the fact that he can really, really screw up your neutral game and just get a lot of free XP off that, he's a really big deal now.
Yeah, that's definitely true. So let's take a look at some of the hero breakdowns here, and there have been a ton of hero changes. A lot of heroes got a little bit of tweaks here and there to try and help their balance out, slight damage modifications, slight stat gain mods, that kind of stuff. But the big four, as I've called them, are Broodmother, Slark, Lich, and Bloodseeker. So Broodmother and Slark are actually out of competitive mode, or captain's mode, pardon me, out of CM, because their changes are so drastic. Now with Broodmother, when she's in her web, she gets path walking or unit walking. She can walk over trees, walk over cliffs inside her web. So that just totally changes the state of that hero. She goes from, for a poor use of words here, bitch to bull kind of in this patch, where she was really, really terrible, and now she's almost ridiculous. So they've taken her out of captain's mode kind of in the interim here, while they make sure that balance is going to work. Sort of the same deal with Slark. We've seen Slark picked up a little bit. I'm scrolling through the patch notes here to make sure I can cite them properly. Essentially, though, when he's in Shadow Dance, the big change is he can no longer be revealed by True Sight. So now he has a trump card invisibility with Shadow Dance. The duration is a little bit shorter. The cooldown has been increased from 25 to 65, which I think is a good counterbalance, but he's permanently invisible for those 4 seconds. So that's a ridiculous change. And again, he's out of captain's mode until Ice Frog can decide if that's really where he needs to be for our current competitive scene. Lich, the big change, and we're going to do a whole segment about Lich, and we'll save some of that theory crafting for a few moments here. But basically, his sacrifice now converts the XP. It denies it, but also now gives it to your friendly heroes nearby as if that was a creep kill. So that's huge. We've seen Lich. He's like the breakout hero of this patch, I think, where he wasn't picked at all now. Lich is insane. And Bloodseeker, he's got some insanity. I think most of us have seen that video that was on Reddit where it showed how fast he can run. But basically, Thirst is now global instead of 6,000 range, and it stacks for each unit that's low on HP. And now he can run unbelievably fast as people get low, and he can see it super far. So Bloodseeker is basically the ultimate in chasing down those sort of 1 or 2 hit away from death kills, sort of like the Zeus without a global ultimate, I guess you could almost say. Thoughts about those 4, Hippie?
Oh, Lich, I'll leave till later, because I do know we have the whole thing going there. Broodmother, I've played against a couple of times. Her win rate hasn't really shot up. I think her main problem is still how much gold she feeds with her spiderlings. I don't think we're going to see her quite as much in CM until that's maybe changed a little bit, but she is really, really frustrating to kill now. It's very, very difficult. Slark will just have to see. It basically means he can play completely balls out aggressive on a 65-second cooldown. We'll have to see if that's powerful enough to give him more of a niche role, or if he's still going to kind of be relegated to, if a team just wants to run a super aggressive carry that they feel they can farm up.
Right.
Bloodseeker, we've seen him used a couple of times. The Thirst change, I think what's bigger than the uncapped move speed, which, don't get me wrong, it's really flashy, it's really cool, you're never going to get away from him. I think bigger is the fact that they switched the bonus from armor to damage, and that stacks up as well. So he can actually, when he's chasing someone down with all that move speed and he gets a swing in, it's actually a really painful swing. Right. On the other hand, you still have to be ahead for him to be good. So I think he'll be worth it on a really aggressive lineup who's constantly harassing people out of lane. And then especially if you have that 1 level of Thirst and people are all the way across map at Half-Life, if you can keep them harassed, he gets these huge laning bonuses. He's a lot bigger threat. It's much easier for him to last hit. But on top of that, you still have to have an advantage for him to be particularly big. So we'll see if he kind of nudges his way more into the meta, or if teams are going to experiment and then say, no, we don't really think he's good enough.
Right. And the other 4 I have here, Batrider, Dazzle, Wisp, and Night Stalker, have all gotten reasonable changes. Batrider, they essentially tanked his starting damage, and let me get the specific numbers here, because it was a big hit. Batrider, his base damage used to be 48 to 52, and it's now down to 38 to 42. So that is a huge jump in his last hit ability. The cast range on Lasso reduced a little bit, 175 down to 100. Vision reduced 1400 to 1200. And I think those are all pretty reasonable balances for Batrider. He's still picked up a lot. He's still insane, just not as insane as he was. Dazzle, still not getting picked at all. Poor Dazzle, but I had to give him a little bit of love. They buffed up Poison Touch, so now it does a huge amount of damage. Early on, they rescaled the way, at least basically just a huge buff for the first couple levels of Dazzle's Poison Touch. And Weave is now a set duration of 20 seconds instead of scaling 12, 18, 24. Another one of those kind of rebalance works. Wisp, now his tether does not stun. Instead, it does 100% attack speed, movement slow, but with that means you can cast spells now. So that has reduced the Wisp potency a little bit. Wisp is sort of fallen out of flavor a little bit for those first picks. We've seen a few teams trying it, but it seems there are more valuable heroes on the board these days than going for that first pick Wisp, although it is still something that you can do. The big breakout hero, though, is that Night Stalker, and this is one, Hippie. Give us some insight here. Why is Night Stalker all of a sudden kind of a breakout pick following this patch? Because his change really wasn't too big. Darkness now causes enemy vision to be reduced by 25%, affects heroes, creeps, and wards. That's sizable, but I mean, we've seen him just in so many games since this patch is launched.
Well, not only do you have to think about the darkness change with 25% on ward vision, if you look at how short ward vision is when he pops that darkness, it's really, really tiny. Like, you can maneuver around the map a lot. He works very well with, as usual, the very aggressive lineups where you can get a whole lot of ganking done. And it's really the shorter day-night cycle, I think, really, really helps him. You have less time where shorter periods of time in which he has to kind of just hang back and play a little scared until he has a huge advantage. Obviously, you're not. I mean, so you've got that first 4 minutes in, you win your lane. I mean, if you're trading even in your lane, you hit 4 minutes, you win. Mm-hmm. And then, or you leave your lane and you go around and kill someone, and obviously you're putting on pressure earlier. There's not as much time for people to maybe get up a couple of defensive items. You can get just that little bit of extra pressure put on at the start of the game. Mm-hmm. And then with the faster day-night cycles, again, I mean, there's a more constant presence coming out from the Night Stalker, even though the actual percentage is obviously the same. The day-night cycle is still, 4-4.
Right. But
it comes down to the fact that you're not just kind of sitting there farming for 6 minutes or until your ultimate is up.
Right. Yeah, that cycle does give him a little bit, and it takes a little bit of pressure off that first night. It always used to be that 6 minutes in first night, you have to make it happen. And now, that first night is still really important. You need to try and make something happen, but it's not as important. That window of opportunity is lesser, but that gives you a shorter time to sort of make that recovery farm with second night. So keep an eye out for Night Stalker, folks. He's been in quite a few matches that we've seen post 0.79. So our last little bit of talking points here with patch 6.79 are with the items. There were some courier changes. Now you can't upgrade the ground courier until 3 minutes after creep spawn, so that does slow down the bottle timings a little bit. In some cases, nothing too crazy. The courier does move a little bit faster now, though, up from 300 base speed to 350, I believe. That's correct. And the HP actually increased as well, 45 to 75 on the animal courier. So that just a small change. Lincoln Sphere, one of the big ones, where now you can actually put the Lincoln's buff on one of your allies instead of putting it on yourself. So that's sort of a cool change that gives Lincoln's a little bit more utility as a support item. Tranquil Boots were another big change. We've seen in the past the quote-unquote abuse of Tranquil Boots, especially with a hero known as Outworld Devourer. He could proc the mana regen aura by using the Tranquil Boots. That's no longer an option because OD doesn't have that from items anymore. And also now Tranquil Boots just don't work that way. They can no longer be disassembled, so you can't use that Guardian Ring kind of willy-nilly as it may be, as we've seen players do that, break it back and forth to use that item and then move into a Vlad's or what have you. Now Tranquil Boots have 85 movement speed, 4 armor, and 10 HP regen when you're out of combat, and when you're in combat they go down to 60 movement speed and just plus 4 armor with no HP regen. And that difference in combat, whether you've been attacked or have attacked in the last 13 seconds. So it's a pretty long window, but when you're out of combat, man, that 10 HP regen is huge for those supports. And the old Tranquil Boots, of course, were 75, 50. So now you actually move a little bit faster when you're out of content or out of combat, and you regenerate a lot more quickly. So is it fair to say this was a buff to Tranquil Boots, Hippie?
I think it was setting Tranquil Boots. Tranquil Boots, I believe, from their inception, were designed as support boots. They were designed for people who need to get around the map quickly, who need some out of combat HP regen, so that they don't have to go back to Fountain as much, so they can be more active. And the new Tranquil Boots are exactly that. Previously, we had obviously the version with the active, the version with the various breaking forms, but the problem was that they were so good just for sustaining anyone that carries would pick them up all the time and just use them to freeform a lane, and that wasn't really what they were there for. They weren't there to be, oh, here's some really cheap HP regen you can use to go really, really greedy builds.
Right.
And then obviously the lack of disassembly, means you can't build it into Vlads anymore, so melee carries who like to build Vlads wouldn't go Tranquils, but they could previously, and just take that apart and make the Vladimir's offering. But now, you have supports who can zoom around the map nice and easy. They're not throwing a lot of auto attacks, so they're not losing a whole lot of that stuff. Maybe they'll lose it when they're stacking a camp or something, but until they're actually in a fight, it's not a big deal. But of course, when you're sitting there pushing up a lane or farming creeps, they're useless. So now carries are going to be forced to go for the slightly more expensive boots. They won't be able to go such greedy builds that still give them all the sustain they need in lane.
I absolutely agree with you on that front, my friend. The last few changes I wanted to mention, Blink Dagger. I know this is one that you were quite excited about, and a lot of others out there. You can now use Blink Dagger on Pudge and Venge, and that's a change that a lot of people have been pushing for a long time. And for those of you concerned about cliff walking, don't worry. Ice Frog's got you covered. If you get swapped or hooked up onto the high ground or you would be stuck, you get 5 seconds, I believe, of cliff walking where you can walk down. So it's sort of almost better for you to get hooked or swapped up there in some situations, because you get cliff walking that lasts for a little while. So in some scenarios, I could see you being able to cliff walk sort of to your advantage to another spot where they may not be with that window of time. It is 5 seconds, right, Hippie? I didn't just make that number up. I think that's I remember reading that somewhere.
5 seconds.
Okay, so an interesting change nonetheless. And the last one I wanted to mention were to wards. The Observer wards and Sentry wards both now last a minute longer. And the Observer wards in particular, now they give a 50 gold bounty when they're killed, which is great. I'm going to have to search here for wards. So that's... I don't know if it's really a buff or a nerf. It's just sort of a change. The duration now, here it is, from 6 to 7 minutes, and yeah, it now gives you a 50 gold bounty. So I kind of like that, but the longer ward duration means there is a slightly different timing window there. It used to be that 6-minute mark for that rune. Now you have that spillover where the first 3 runes will generally be covered, and you can throw that first ward down a little bit earlier and not have to worry about it expiring before the 6-minute mark if you put it down before creeps spawn. And with the sentry wards here, there it is. So their duration has also been increased by a minute, 3 minutes to 4 minutes, but it no longer gives permanent vision around it. It gives ground vision in a 150 area around it for 12 seconds when placed. So now you can't just throw down sentries and sort of preemptively counter ward. You got to throw it down and kill the ward that you're trying to counter within that 12-second window if you don't have any other vision nearby. So that's sort of an interesting tweak there to the sentry wards. So,
yes.
Oh, go ahead.
Yes,
No, go ahead.
it's. Sorry, go ahead, Monoloth.
No.
All right. It's interesting because you're no longer using. You used to be able to basically just drop a sentry on a cliff to counterward stuff. Now you're going to need to use an observer. You're going to need to keep things scattered out. The longer duration for observers is obviously going to make that more possible. But extra vision, flying vision, any hero that gives flying vision like Storm Spirit, like Bat Rider, are going to be all the more valuable. Anyone who can easily put themselves on the cliff to check for things, Visage Birds in particular. So you can still do plenty of good counter warding, but you need to be a lot more active about keeping vision of high ground areas instead of just knowing that your sentry ward is going to cover that ward spot.
Right. All right, cool. So that does wrap up our talking points here about patch 6.79, sort of the big highlights in a nutshell. If you're interested in the specific patch notes here, I'll link the dev blog in chat, and I'm sure most of you have seen them by now. This is sort of catching up on the past few days since we started in the middle of the week. We were going to do the Lich segment with Hippie, but I think we're going to go ahead and get Owie 2000 in here now since we told him right around 11, and then we'll come back to your segment, Hippie, after we're done with the interview. So with that, folks, we are going to cut to a little break here. We're going to get Aoi on the call, and we'll be back in about 2 minutes with that interview. So sit tight, and Dota Radio Morning Show going to be returning here in just about 2 minutes.